What if I told you that the specific piece of gear you rely on to see the lightest bites is the exact same thing terrified big fish are running away from? Today we are talking about your favorite spring bobber. I am going to reveal a hidden, unnatural mistake happening right under the ice that is costing you the biggest fish of your life. If you sit for hours wondering why the giants inspect your bait but never actually bite, the answer is literally hanging right off the tip of your rod. Do you really think your grandfather's old-school bright orange spring bobber is helping you? Or is it just a crutch for bad eyesight? Let us know in the comments before we start. For generations, ice fishermen have obsessed over bite detection. We all know the feeling of freezing our hands off, staring intensely at a tiny piece of wire or plastic, waiting for the slightest twitch. The logic has always been simple. Light-biting fish require highly visible, sensitive indicators. So, we buy bulky, brightly colored spring bobbers. We paint them neon orange and green. We use them for years because, honestly, they do work on smaller, aggressive fish. It becomes a habit. You drill the hole, clear the ice, clip on the bobber, and sit down. Most of us never second-guess it because it is exactly what we were taught to do. We trust these little devices blindly. But by sticking strictly to this decades-old tradition, we have completely ignored how the underwater environment actually works. We forgot to look at the situation through the eyes of the smartest, oldest fish in the lake. It is time to step back and analyze why doing the exact same thing for 20 years might be holding you back from landing a true trophy. Picture this. It is a beautiful, crisp morning out on the frozen lake. The sun is just starting to peek over the tree line. You have your favorite spot picked out. You drill your hole, clear out the slush, and drop your favorite tungsten jig down into the icy depths. You attach that trusty old spring bobber to the end of your rod. You know the one. It is that bright orange metal coil that you have used for 10 years. You sit there in the dead silence of the morning. You watch that little orange tip like a hawk. You are waiting for that tiny twitch that tells you a monster crappie is on the line. But nothing happens. An hour goes by. Then 2 hours. You start wondering if the fish are even there. Maybe the pressure dropped. Maybe they are not hungry. But what if the fish are actually down there, staring right at your bait? What if they want to eat it, but they are absolutely terrified of something else? Something you did not even realize you put right in front of them. Let us talk about what is really happening under that ice. Think about the physics of light when you are out on the ice. When we are standing above the frozen lake, everything is bright. The white snow reflects the sun straight into our eyes. We wear polarized sunglasses just to handle the glare. But down below, in the fish world, it is a completely different story. Under a thick layer of snow and 10 inches of solid ice, it is dark and gloomy. It is a shadowy world where survival depends on being cautious. Now imagine you drill an 8-inch hole straight through that roof of ice. You just opened up a skylight in a dark room. A massive beam of bright sunlight shoots straight down into the water. For a fish, that beam of light is like a spotlight on a stage. It highlights everything in that column of water. Your bait is glowing, your line is illuminated, and anything sitting right at the surface of that hole is going to cast a massive, dark shadow down into the depths. This is where the mechanics of light start working against you without you even noticing. Every tiny flutter of your hand is instantly broadcasted to the entire underwater neighborhood as a massive, sweeping silhouette. You have to put yourself in the perspective of the fish. Imagine you are a big, old, wise walleye or a massive slab crappie. You did not get to be that big by being stupid. You got big by being paranoid. You are hovering down there in the dim water, looking up toward the surface. Fish naturally look up to find food silhouetted against the lighter sky above. So this giant, bright skylight opens up above you. You see a tiny, tasty-looking bug dancing right in the middle of that light beam. It looks like an easy meal. You slowly swim up to inspect it. You are getting closer, ready to open your mouth and inhale that jig. But then, right above the bait, blocking out the sun, is this weird, unnatural, jagged black shape. It is dancing and shaking in a way that nothing in nature ever does. That shadow does not look like a bug. It looks like danger. And just like that, the fish turns its tail and swims back down to the dark weeds. You up on the ice never even saw the bite happen. You are just left sitting there in the cold, blindly guessing why the fish lost interest in your perfectly good bait. For decades, we have been taught to use the biggest, brightest strike indicators we can find. Our grandfathers used them. Our fathers used them. It is practically a fishing tradition. They told us that if you want to catch the light biters, you need a highly visible spring bobber. We buy them in neon pink, bright yellow, and fluorescent green. We want them to be chunky and thick, so our tired eyes can see them shivering in the wind. We think that bright color is doing us a favor. But here is the hard truth that breaks those old school rules. The fish do not care what color your bobber is painted. They cannot see the neon pink paint from below. All they see is a dark silhouette blocking the sunlight. We have spent all this time optimizing our gear for our own eyesight, completely forgetting about what the fish sees. We engineered the perfect tool to help us see a strike, but we accidentally created the perfect tool to scare away the smartest fish in the lake. It is time to rethink this old habit. Let us talk about what a coiled metal spring actually looks like from 10 feet down. You know the classic spring bobber. It is a tightly wound piece of metal wire that extends off the tip of your rod. When you look at it from above, it is just a thin wire. But when the sunlight hits that metal coil from above, it casts a very specific, weird shadow down the hole. Because the wire is coiled, it does not just cast a straight line. It casts a thick, ribbed, unnatural shape. Now add the fact that you are jigging. You are shaking your wrist to give your bait some action. That means that thick, ribbed shadow is also shaking, vibrating, and dancing right across the strike zone. To a trophy fish, this looks like a chaotic, unnatural predator or a piece of debris behaving wildly. It creates a visual disturbance that completely ruins the natural presentation of your bait. You might have the most realistic, expensive tungsten bug tied on your line, but that shaking shadow destroys the entire illusion. Now, you might be thinking, I catch fish with my spring bobber all the time. And you are probably right. But what kind of fish are you catching? Small panfish, aggressive little bluegills, and hungry little perch usually do not care. They are young, dumb, and competing with each other for food. If you drop a shiny hook down there, 3 little bluegills will race to grab it before the others do. They do not take the time to inspect the shadows. But this video is not about catching tiny bait fish. This is about catching trophy fish, the ones that have survived for 10 or 15 years. A 2-pound crappie or a 10-pound walleye acts completely differently. They are solitary, cautious, and incredibly observant. They will hover inches away from your bait for 5 minutes, just watching it. If anything feels off, if anything looks unnatural, they will simply refuse to bite. The shadow from your bulky spring bobber is exactly the kind of unnatural warning sign that sends a trophy fish swimming away. There is a constant debate among ice fishermen about what triggers a bite. Is it vibration or is it visual cues? We spend a lot of money on baits that vibrate, rattle, and push water. We want the fish to feel the bait from far away using their lateral lines. And yes, vibration brings them in. But once they get close, vision takes over. Under the ice, especially in clear water lakes, fish rely heavily on their eyesight for that final strike. You can have the perfect vibration, the perfect scent, and the perfect bait profile. But if the visual picture is wrong, the fish will abort the mission. The shadow of your spring bobber overrides all the good things your bait is doing. It is like serving a gourmet steak on a garbage lid. The smell is great, but the presentation ruins the appetite. When that big fish comes in close, Its eyes are locked on the bait and the water column directly above it. If a strange shadow is dancing wildly up there, the visual red flag wins over the vibration every single time. Picture this real-life scenario. You are sitting in your ice shelter with a fish finder screen glowing in front of you. You see a massive red mark appear at the bottom of the screen. Your heart starts racing. This is the monster you have been waiting for all day. You watch the red mark slowly rise up from the bottom. It is tracking your bait. The fish is now 2 feet away, then 1 foot away. Your hands are shaking. You hold your breath, staring at your brightly colored spring bobber, waiting for it to dip. On the screen, the fish's mark merges with your bait's mark. It is right there. You brace yourself for the hook set, but the bobber does not move. You wait 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Then slowly, the red mark on the screen separates and fades back down to the bottom. The fish is gone. You pull up your bait and everything looks fine. What went wrong? In many of these cases, the fish came up, saw the chaotic shadow of your bobber dancing in the light of the hole, got spooked, and bailed out. It is a heartbreaking reality that happens thousands of times a day on frozen lakes everywhere. Let us take a closer look at the different types of strike indicators, starting with the classic metal spring. These have been around forever. They are cheap, easy to use, and very sensitive. But they are also the worst offenders when it comes to casting a terrifying shadow. Because they are made of solid, opaque metal, they block out 100% of the light that hits them. There is no transparency at all. When you position your rod tip right over the center of the ice hole, that metal coil sits exactly in the middle of the light beam penetrating the water. Every single twitch of your hand sends a ripple of darkness down into the strike zone. If you are fishing in shallow water, say under 10 feet, that dark shadow is sharp, focused, and highly visible to the fish below. It is essentially a strobe light of darkness flashing over your bait. No wonder the big smart fish refuse to commit when they see a metal slinky violently shaking above their food. What about the flat plastic bobbers? A lot of modern ice fishermen have switched to these. They are usually made of flat strips of plastic or mylar. They are super sensitive for those light-biting crappies, but they have their own major flaw. Because they are flat and wide, they act like a miniature solar eclipse down in the water. A metal coil might cast a jagged shadow, but a wide, flat piece of plastic casts a solid, dark block of a shadow. When you look at it from the side, it is thin, but the sun is usually shining from above, hitting the wide top of the plastic. This creates a wide, dark silhouette. Imagine a small bait fish swimming along, and suddenly a massive, dark cloud blocks out the sun above it. That is exactly what a big crappie sees. It looks like a bird of prey or a larger predator looming overhead. It triggers a natural flight response. The fish is not just ignoring your bait, it is actively fleeing from what it thinks is a predator's shadow. Then we have the issue of neon paint. We love to paint our rod tips and bobbers bright orange, neon green, or hot pink. The logic makes sense for us. When everything around you is white snow and gray ice, you need a bright color to help your eyes focus. But we forget how light works. Bright paint does not emit light, it just reflects it back to our eyes. Down below, the fish cannot see the bright neon top. They only see the underside of the bobber, which is in complete darkness. To a fish looking up, neon pink looks exactly the same as matte black. It is just a solid, opaque silhouette. So you might think your bright yellow bobber is stealthy and happy, but to the walleye 10 feet below, it is a jet black wedge shaking violently against the bright sky. We let our need for convenience blind us to the actual underwater environment. We are literally painting a target on our lines, but it is a target that warns the fish to stay away. Depth plays a massive role in how bad this shadow problem actually is. If you are fishing in 30 or 40 feet of water, this shadow effect matters a lot less. By the time the sunlight travels down 30 feet, it scatters and diffuses. The shadow from your tiny spring bobber will spread out and become completely invisible long before it reaches the bottom. In deep water, you can use whatever chunky, ugly bobber you want. But if you are fishing in shallow water, say 3 to 12 feet deep, you are in the danger zone. In shallow water, especially clear water, the shadow is crisp, dark, and highly focused. It hits the bottom, it hits the weeds, and it hits the fish right in the face. Many of the best spots for big bluegills and crappies are in these shallow weed beds. This is exactly where the old smart fish live. And this is exactly where your favorite spring bobber is doing the most damage to your catch rate. If you want to pull a giant fish out of 4 feet of water, you cannot afford to drop a heavy black shadow directly on its head. You also have to consider the angle of the sun. The shadow problem changes throughout the day. At high noon, when the sun is directly overhead, the shadow shoots straight down your hole. It lands right on top of your bait. This is the absolute worst time to have a big, bulky bobber hovering over the ice. But early in the morning or late in the afternoon, the sun is at a low angle. The sunlight hits the ice hole and casts the shadow off to the side, maybe several feet away from your bait. This is why some guys swear they catch all their big fish right at sunrise or sunset. They think it is just a feeding window. But part of the secret is that the low sun angle moves the terrifying bobber shadow away from the strike zone. The fish can finally come up and inspect the bait without a violently shaking black silhouette distracting them. By understanding the sun angle, you start to see why the bite shuts down so hard in the middle of the day. Let us talk about a habit almost every ice fisherman has: drilling a hole and scooping out absolutely every single piece of ice and slush until the water is perfectly clear. We love looking down a perfectly clean hole. It feels tidy. But this is actually one of the biggest mistakes you can make if you are using a spring bobber. When you completely clear the hole, you create a perfect, unobstructed window for sunlight to pour through. You maximize the spotlight effect. This makes the shadow of your bobber as dark and sharp as physically possible. You are setting the stage for maximum fish terror. Every movement you make is broadcasted straight down that clean, clear tube of water. Grandpa always said to clear the hole so the line does not freeze as fast. And while that might save you from picking ice off your line for a few minutes, it is costing you the biggest fish in the lake. A perfectly clean hole is a trap that amplifies your gear's flaws. You are essentially turning a subtle fishing presentation into a high-beam warning signal for any intelligent creature swimming around down there. There is a very simple trick to fix the clean hole problem, and it changes everything. When you drill your hole, do not scoop out all the slush. Leave a good layer of ice shavings and slush floating right at the surface of the water. Poke a small hole right in the center with your rod tip, just big enough to drop your jig down. This layer of slush acts like a frosted glass window. It diffuses the harsh sunlight pouring into the hole. Instead of a bright, focused spotlight, you get a soft, dim glow. More importantly, this frosted glass effect completely blurs and erases the sharp shadow of your spring bobber. The light is scattered before it can form a silhouette. The big, wise fish looking up just sees a soft, natural-looking canopy of ice with your tasty jig hanging below it. No dark, shaking lines, no terrifying black shapes. Just by leaving a little slush in the hole, you can instantly neutralize the shadow problem and keep your favorite bobber. But what if you want to eliminate the problem completely? It might be time to look at alternative indicators. The modern ice fishing industry has finally started to figure this out. Instead of big, bulky metal coils or wide plastic strips, many professional anglers are switching to highly engineered titanium wire bite indicators. These titanium wires are incredibly thin, almost like a guitar string. Because they are so thin, they do not block enough light to cast a solid shadow. The sunlight simply wraps right around the microscopic wire. Another great alternative is using a rod with a super sensitive, ultralight carbon or glass tip built right into the blank. You do not add any external bobber at all. You just watch the painted tip of the rod itself. Because the rod tip stays slightly off to the side of the hole and your thin line goes straight down, there is virtually no shadow cast over the strike zone. It is a completely stealthy approach for highly pressured fish. When there is no bulky hardware blocking the sun, there is absolutely no shadow to scare the fish away, giving you a massive advantage. Let me share a story about fishing side by side with a buddy. We were out on a Clearwater lake, sitting in the exact same shelter, fishing holes that were only 3 feet apart. We were fishing in about 8 feet of water for big, suspended crappies. We were using the exact same tungsten jigs and the exact same plastic baits. My buddy had his classic, thick metal spring bobber set up. I was using a highly sensitive noodle rod with no external bobber, just tight lining it. For 3 hours, I was pulling up one massive slab crappie after another. My buddy? He caught absolutely nothing. He was getting so frustrated. He could see the fish on his sonar coming up to his bait, sitting there for a minute, and then swimming away. We traded rods just to test it out. Almost instantly, he started catching fish with my rod, and the fish started rejecting my bait on his rod. The only difference was that dark, shaking spring bobber shadow ruining the presentation. You also need to adjust your gear based on the weather conditions. Think about the difference between a cloudy, overcast day and a bright bluebird sky day. On a heavily overcast day, the sunlight is already diffused by the clouds before it even hits the ice. There are very few harsh shadows anywhere, above or below the ice. On those dark, gloomy days, you can absolutely get away with using your bulky spring bobber. The shadow effect is minimal because the ambient light is so low. But the day after a cold front, when there is not a single cloud in the sky and the sun is blindingly bright, that is the day you need to leave the bulky spring bobber in your tackle box. That harsh, direct sunlight will turn your indicator into a terrifying underwater strobe light. Recognizing these weather patterns and knowing when to switch up your visual bite detection method is what separates the guys who catch a few small fish from the guys who consistently ice the giants. Now, I am not saying you need to throw all your spring bobbers in the trash. There are situations where they are still the absolute best tool for the job. If you are fishing inside a dark, flip-over shelter or a hard-sided ice house with the windows closed, you are essentially fishing in the dark. You are blocking the sunlight from hitting the hole anyway. In that situation, there is no shadow being cast down the hole. You can use the thickest, brightest spring bobber you own, and the fish will never know it is there. The same goes for night fishing. If you are out on the ice at 2 in the morning hunting for walleyes, the only light is your headlamp. Shadows are not an issue. Or if you are fishing in incredibly murky, muddy water, where visibility is only a few inches, the fish are relying entirely on their lateral lines anyway. In those specific scenarios, keep using the old school methods. You just have to know when and where to deploy them. Here is the ultimate test for your next trip out on the hard water. I challenge you to try this. Go out on a bright sunny day, drill a hole in about 4 feet of clear water. Scoop out all the slush so the hole is perfectly clean. Do not bait your hook yet. Just drop your jig down a couple of feet. Now, put your face close to the ice, block the glare with your hands, and look straight down into the water. Hold your rod normally and shake the tip like you are working a jig. Watch what happens below. You will clearly see the dark, jagged shadow of your spring bobber violently dancing around in the water column. It will shock you how obvious and unnatural it looks. Once you see it with your own eyes, you will completely understand why that massive old bluegill took one look and bolted. Seeing is believing. Take a moment to inspect your own setup from the fish's point of view before you start fishing. It will completely change the way you look at your gear. To wrap it all up, the biggest takeaway here is realizing that our fishing gear interacts with the underwater world in ways we rarely think about. That classic spring bobber might be highly visible to you up on the ice, but down below it acts like a wildly shaking, dark shadow that screams danger to a wise trophy fish. The turning point is simply changing your perspective. Once you stop looking at your gear purely for your own convenience and start looking at it from the perspective of a paranoid 10-year-old walleye looking up into the sunlight, everything clicks. What a twist, right? The very tool designed to help you catch more fish is actively scaring away the best ones. By adjusting your setup, utilizing the slush trick, or switching to stealthy inline rods, you instantly eliminate this unnatural threat. This simple realization will completely change your approach to shallow, clear water ice fishing. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out on the ice with us today. If this blew your mind or changed how you look at your gear, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more hardcore fishing truths. Hit that like button if you learned something new. And leave a comment below. What is the weirdest thing you have ever seen spook a big fish right at the hole? Let us talk about it.